I'm Josh Barrow, host of Left, Right, and Center, KCRW's weekly forum for civilized debate across the political spectrum. Today's news cycle demands more time for deeper analysis, so Left, Right, and Center is now a full hour every week. Subscribe and listen at kcrw.com/LRC.
Here Be Monsters is a show that invites you to explore fear and the unknown.
I saw her face change. I saw her see where I'd pulled my hair out.
Psychological warfare was always considered kind of an oddity, something done by freaks.
On the count of 3, we're literally going to step out of our body. Step out.
You can find the new season of Here Be Monsters on August 17th at kcrw.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
From KCRW Santa Monica and KCRW.com, it's The Treatment. Welcome to The Treatment. I'm Elvis Mitchell. The film Too Late is a love letter to Los Angeles, a love letter to film, and most importantly, a love letter to actors. It's writer-director Dennis Hauck sitting across from me. Dennis, first of all, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And it is a love letter to actors, isn't it?
I think so. I wrote every single role in the movie, almost. I wrote with a specific actor in mind. Not all of them ended up being in the movie, but it was kind of a situation where I knew I was a first-time director. We weren't going to have a lot of money, so I just kind of looked to what actors I knew personally or actors that I thought I had some sort of tenuous connection to that I could get to, and I just started writing roles for them. And the biggest, obviously, was John Hawkes.
Who's provisionally the star, but I don't know if we can say that there is a star in this movie so much. And I really feel like the city is the star of the movie because it takes place all over the city, and it's in Techniscope. It's a beautiful film, we should say, shot on film.
Yeah.
And each scene is a single take.
Yes.
Of a single reel of film. And it's interesting in that at a certain point there's a shift where we think we're seeing one thing and we become something else every single time out. Was that part of your conception early on?
I think so. Yeah, there's really only 5 scenes in the movie, and each of them about one shot. So I liked the idea of just taking the 5 most important scenes in our lead character's life, or at least the 5 most important scenes revolving around this story that we're telling. But at the same time, you know, I wanted to kind of paint a broader portrait of Los Angeles and bring in other interesting characters, so it was a bit of an ensemble. And I liked the idea of each of the 5 scenes starts off with other people, with other characters, and then John Hawkes' character kind of weaves his way into it, almost like he's kind of stepping in and out of other people's movies. And we incorporated that into the look. Each of the 5 scenes has its own look and feel and tone. So it's almost like you're just sitting there watching TV and you're flipping the channel, and no matter what channel you land on, John Hawkes just appears in that program.
We talked about this a little bit after I saw the film at the LA Film Festival last year, and I want you to talk about the process of getting this thing on film, because you can rehearse it, but it's really got to live in that one time you're shooting it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we shot each of the scenes multiple times, but you're only going to pick one of them, and we only had a day to shoot each of the scenes, and we just did it as many times as we could, but we had about 3 days on set, 2 days of rehearsal and 1 day of shooting, and you just, I don't know, you start out on the first day and everyone's meeting each other, and the crew, they don't have the script memorized and the shot, they don't know, they're just showing up for a day of work. So to get everyone up to speed at the same level that myself or the cinematographer or John Hawkes or the actors, we all know, but everyone else has to kind of memorize this script and every little intricacy involved with pulling off a elaborately choreographed 20-minute take. It was a lot. So you show up on set and the first day just feels like a disaster. Like we can't make it through 2 minutes of this without someone pausing and saying, well, where do I go now? Or hitting into a doorway or whatever. But then slowly you just kind of add more pieces to the ballet and to the dance, and it comes together. And almost invariably, it was the last take of the day on all 5 of the shots.
And we go from basically a hike to inside a bar to a drive-in movie theater to basically kind of a rooftop area to a hotel room. It's really each of these things has their own demands. I just found myself really the most impressed by the one I thought some ways must have been the hardest, which is the hotel scene featuring Natalie Z. I mean, because that really, at least you can sort of vary the background when you're moving the camera around in other places, but having to really fix on actors. And that's when I thought to myself, this really does feel like something where you've got to be in love with these actors or else the movie just doesn't work.
Oh, yeah. And trust me, I was crazy about Natalie Z, and this was the third role I had offered her in the movie before she finally came on board. And Natalie, for this role, and that's one of the most dramatic scenes of the movie. And
we share this 3 generations of families dealing with a problem that I don't want to give away because it's really the crux of the film.
Yeah, but Natalie came on board basically that day she was cast. We had another actress on board for over a year, and a couple days before we went to shoot, she dropped out, and we were left, the crew was setting up lights at the Beverly Hilton. We had all our money kind of already spent, and we had no lead actress for one of the most dramatic scenes in the film. So I was really, I was in a dark place. And Natalie was one of those actors I had mentioned earlier that I'd written a role for, not this role. And she was on board. She was a friend of a friend. She was a friend of our producer, Alexandra Barreto. And so I kind of knew her, and I said, Alex, I wrote this role for Natalie. I think she's great, blah, blah, blah. And she said, okay, yeah, I'll do it. It was a smaller role than the one she ended up playing. And then she got cast on the Kevin Bacon thing, that Showtime show, or not Showtime, Fox show, The Following. Yeah. She couldn't do it anymore. We recast that role, but I always had her in my mind. And then all of a sudden, when we were just left out to dry and we needed someone, it's like, let's call Natalie again. And she came on at the very last minute. I mean, everyone was there. She was meeting John Hawkes the day we shot that. She was memorizing these lines. I mean, she woke up that morning and didn't know she had the role, basically.
How many times did that kind of thing happen?
It's crazy. Some people had their roles for 3 years before we shot their scene, and there were a few.
Who had a role for 3 years before you shot?
Well, some of my good friends that I wrote the roles for. Deachin Lackman, who plays Jill.
Who runs the drive-in.
Yes. So she had, right away, I think in 2011, I finished the script and said, here you go, you're playing this role. And the same for my friend Brett Jacobson, who plays Fontaine, and Ryder Strong as well. He's a friend of mine that we used to live next door to each other. So the 3 of them, they knew right away. But then other people, Robert Forster, he came on almost as last minute. That was pretty scary as well, because I'd written that role for Peter Bogdanovich, and Peter was actually on board before John was even attached to the movie. He was on board for a long time, but that was just a scheduling thing. By the time we were finally able to shoot, he was making his movie, the Jennifer Aniston, She's Funny That Way. So it was just a scheduling thing, and we at least had a few weeks to recast, and Robert came on and was wonderful.
Talk about that sequence, because that's Robert and Jeff Fahey and Sidney Pache, and that one scene is, I think, sort of goes through the most stuff emotionally.
Yeah, that was the scene that intimidated me the most as a director to shoot. I think because a lot of the movie, it's intimate and it's 2 people having a conversation for, large periods of time. That scene evolves into, or maybe devolves into, 5 people yelling at each other for 5 minutes at the end, and it's kind of chaos. And the camera.
And there's a technical demand in the scene that I don't want to give away either, that has to play off too.
Sure, yeah. There's some in-camera special effects. Yeah, that I forgot about that. To add that to the end of a 20-minute oneer is, but Elvis, I was thinking about the acting, so. Well, to have all these actors, you only have one camera. It's all one shot. To figure out how to cover them was scary enough, but also knowing, well, these guys are all veterans in there. Robert Forster's been in the business acting for probably 50 years. Jeff Fahey's been around a long time. John's been around a long time. I mean, even Sidney, not near as long as them. But anyways, I knew I was going to be a first-time director with all these veterans just looking to me for the answers, and I wasn't sure I would have them.
So what kind of questions are they asking you?
They didn't really ask me anything. I mean, it was all in my head, you know, where do I stand? And it was easier than I thought it would be.
Well, my guess just says making movies is just like falling off a log, as Dennis Hauck. His first film as writer-director is the pretty incredible film, Too Late. Talk about your first day on the set, your first day shooting.
Well, that was way back in May of 2012.
We should say, yeah, you shot this film over a period of years because each section of the film could play as a short. I mean, it does feel like its own discrete section of the film.
Yeah, it's all one story. It's not like a series of 5. But yeah, we did shoot them almost like 5 separate short films. And I never thought it would take us so many years to finish. It kind of turned into a Boyhood thing when I thought initially, like, okay, 5 scenes, it's all 5 shots, we'll shoot this in a week, we'll do 1 per day, which was insanely naive of me. I thought at least we would shoot it that summer of 2012, but we kind of did something you should probably never do, which is to start making your movie without all the money in the bank. John came on board and, you know, I thought he would say, okay, I've got some time available in 6 months. Let's shoot the movie in 6 months. But he was ready right then. He said, let's go, let's shoot it. And so I said, okay, we'll start shooting it. And so we had enough to shoot one of them, and I started off with the scene, the kind of the centerpiece scene, which takes place half at a strip club, and then John goes outside, walks down the street, and goes into a honky-tonk where there's a live band playing, and finishes up the next 10 minutes. So we did that. And that was terrifying because it was all theoretical at that point. Whether we could actually pull off the physical demands of shooting a 20-minute scene on film with these heavy 35mm cameras with a Steadicam operator, it was almost just an endurance thing. Like, can any human, any skilled technician actually make it 22 minutes without collapsing? And can he do it over and over for 10, 12 times in one night. And we found out they couldn't, basically. And so so we had 2 guys, 2 Steadicam operators, and they actually figured out an ingenious way to hand off the camera to each other in the middle of the take. So each of them only had to do 10 minutes at a time.
But let me ask you about the last sequence you shot.
Mm-hmm.
And did you feel at that point like you knew how to put it on the page so the actors could feel confident and just play it instead of, asking you questions?
No. I mean, that's another thing going back to Natalie Z, that she took that in a direction that it ended up in the same place emotionally I wanted it to, but she accomplished it in a much different way than I ever thought.
How do you mean?
There's not a lot of improv in this movie. Everything is pretty much, and that's one thing I would talk to with John, and he was so respectful of just anytime we disagreed about a line or he wasn't sure about it, I would hear him out, and sometimes I'd say, you know what, your idea is better, let's do that. And sometimes I'd say, John, I know you don't love this, but will you please say it anyways? And he would. So it was basically everything in the movie was according to script. But there were just little things in Act 5, the last scene, that went off the rails by the very nature of, like, Natalie was cast at the last minute, and she was just kind of learning the script. And so I think sometimes she would forget the actual lines, but she knew the emotional intent and where the scene needed to go. So I was at the edge of my seat watching these takes, and all of a sudden she would be saying something and the scene would go a slightly off direction, and I would be really panicking. But it always ended up, and at the end of the day, that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and I guess it was good for me to relinquish a little control on that. I'm not sure I answered your question. I tried to answer a different question that you didn't ask.
That's the way this show works. We'll take a little break to give my guest, Dennis Hauck, a chance to collect himself. It took a while, but he got his movie made, and it's coming out. The film is Too Late. It's The Treatment. There's more to come. Stay with us.
Check out KCRW's all-news channel, News 24. Programming from KCRW, NPR, BBC, and more, 24 hours a day. Go to kcrw.com/news24 or listen on KCRW's app.
This podcast is produced by nonprofit radio station KCRW. Support the podcasts you enjoy by donating at kcrw.com/join. And thanks.
Welcome back. As you can tell, none of this is choreographed. It's the treatment. My guest is the writer-director Dennis Hauck, whose very cool first film is Too Late. And are you able to get the film on film to be projected in many places at all since it was shot on film?
Yeah, well, that's what we did. That was our theatrical release this spring. We played about 30 cities across the country. I tried to tour around with it as much as possible. And it was a great experience. I mean, there's a lot more theaters out there that held onto their film projectors than people think. And just, it was a bit of a, I don't want to say mixed bag. There were one or two theaters that I showed up and, it's sad because the whole infrastructure for 35 millimeter projection has kind of been, had the rug pulled out from under it. I mean, a lot of these theaters, they got rid of their projectors altogether, or they fired their projectionists, or just they haven't had a chance to use their projectors in years because the studios aren't giving them any more film prints. So there was a few bumps in the road with sometimes, I would get a little discouraged because I would be talking about how much better film projection is than digital, and if there's a problem, then suddenly it's like, oh, well, maybe it's not. But it is, because then you would go to a theater that just knew exactly what they were doing, and it would be absolutely beautiful and so much better than anything digital could ever do. The Alamo Drafthouse theaters were some of the best that we played in. Those guys really have their stuff together. The new one in San Francisco, gigantic 300-seat theater, and it's an old movie palace. Have you been up there?
I've not been to that Drafthouse.
They just opened it up, I think, with Star Wars like 6 months ago. So I think we were the first indie movie to play in that gigantic theater. And I heard some of the studios were upset that they kicked off their big movies to play our little movie. But it looked beautiful for the people scattered around that giant theater that was probably too big for us anyways. But yeah, we had a great 35 millimeter only theatrical release, and now finally heading to the afterlife of cinema.
Yeah, now you're getting a chance to look at those things, like looking at all those various versions of it that you have to try to make it look like the print.
Yeah.
What's that like?
It's never right. It's never quite right. I mean, but I think it'll look good. We scanned the negative at 4K, which I guess is good. It's better than half of the studios. I read this stuff. I read American Cinematographer and everything, and giant blockbusters are being scanned at 2K or released at 2K, which I just don't understand. How our little movie.
Because how'd you end up getting it? Because when you say 4K, most people don't have TVs that can play 4K.
Sure. But for theatrical release, I mean, that's the sad thing to me, is that these digital projectors that have replaced film projectors, they have about the same resolution as the phone in your pocket, and that's what we're paying more and more money to go see. It's insanity to me, but it's the world we live in.
And obviously you chose film because it just meant something more to you. I mean, because you could very easily have done this digitally and done as many takes as you want and find a way to electronically splice things together so nobody would know they weren't. You could say it was the movie shot over a course of 5 days and nobody would have known.
Yeah. Well, shooting film, I've never shot anything digitally. So the short films I had done, it was all, I don't understand. I look at a Red camera and Alexa, I don't know what's going on there. Film seems very simple and timeless to me, and it's all I've ever shot on. So it was never a choice. Like, I was weighing some apples and oranges, like, which direction do I want to go? And it was just, we're making a movie and it's on film. And yeah, as far as hiding cuts, that just seemed like cheating to me. We couldn't quite. I was always tempted. I mean, you get the dailies, never on set. We went in there with our game plan was to make the movie, each of these 5 takes. There would be no cuts, no CGI. Everything is accomplished on set, in camera, with the crew. And we did that, but it was every time you get the batch of dailies back and you're looking at these 10 takes of a 20-minute scene, there's never a perfect take. There's always a few there's one that's overall amazing, but there's a few things in there. There's that one moment that's just so magical in take 8, but you're not going to use take 8 because take 10 is overall the best. And for that devil's on your shoulder for a minute, like, oh, I bet when we go through these this dark hallway, we could use a little magic, digital magic, and no one would ever know. But I would know, and it would bother me, and it defeated the purpose. Because to me, so much of the fun of watching this, it's not just 20 minutes in the character's life. This is 20 minutes of John Hauck's life, and you're seeing him, and he's on camera the whole time, and then at the end of the 20 minutes, he's singing a song and playing guitar, and it's just like, there's something really exciting about that if you manipulate or if you create that digitally, it seems to defeat its own purpose.
And your love of film comes from what?
I don't know. I never really thought about it until it started going away. Oh, I guess it was never a question. Like, I probably was the last, like, film school generation to learn how to make movies on film.
Where'd you go to school?
Florida State.
And so were you shooting 16?
Yeah, we shot 16 and then some 35 for the thesis films. So that's just how I learned. And then, I don't know, I guess when the digital came along, it just didn't interest me. I was like, wait, what is this? What's the matter with this method?
Because the thing, obviously, when you're shooting film, in a case like this, you're shooting 10 takes, then you don't have the actors anymore, there's nothing you can do to change anything.
Yeah, I know, which was always scary, but that was the thrill of it.
My guest, who clearly loves playing Russian roulette, is Dennis Hauck, the director of Too Late, which I hope you had a chance to see in its theatrical run because it was such a physically beautiful film. And the sequence that I want to ask you, which sequence overall people tend to respond the most to, because the most bravura sequence at the LA Film Festival screening was the sequence at the drive-in, which people just really, obviously at a film festival, the audience is going to especially tell the audience what the film is playing in that sequence. There's a movie playing.
Yeah, Carnival of Souls from, 1962?
Yeah.
That was fun because, and again, that was all real. That's playing. It's a 35 millimeter print that's playing in the background of the screen of the scene that our actress, Deechin Lackman, is actually, the scene starts off and she's threading up the reel. She gets the projector going and then you see it throughout the background. And it really, I love that movie, and it's just got such a one-of-a-kind, unique atmosphere and a really haunting score, an organ score that kind of becomes our score as the scene progresses and really adds an interesting mood to the scene.
How'd you end up picking that? Because you must have had any number of films you could have done for that.
Yeah,
that sequence.
I don't know. It was a movie that I've always really loved, and then we actually I got in. I think it might have been because I think people think it's a public domain film, but it's actually not. But I got in touch with the...
Did you think it was public domain at one point yourself?
I'd heard that, and so obviously, we knew we didn't have enough money, so I started looking at public domain films. But that was always something a movie I loved, and I got a hold of the rights owner, and he just said, yeah, sure, that sounds cool. And it wasn't just that we needed permission to show the movie. We also needed a print, a 35 millimeter film print, and it wasn't just... Can we borrow a film print? It was, can we strike a brand new film print? Because I was worried about damaging it when our actress is actually the one projecting.
And was she actually projecting? Did she actually? Okay.
Yeah, we took her to the silent movie theater, the Cinefamily here in Los Angeles, and the projectionist there, Robinson, taught her how to run the projectors, and he was also on set helping out as well. But also, when we printed Carnival of Souls, made a new print, we made it to be much brighter than you would ever normally want a print to be because the drive-ins are so dim.
And it's such a long throw, too.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's a long field of projection, I mean to say.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, going back about everyone having their own favorite of the 5 scenes. It's so most movies have dozens and dozens of little scenes, and this only has 5. So it's very easy to ask people what their favorite scenes are. There's definitely that's interesting that you thought the reaction at the LA Film Fest was Act 4, the drive-in scene, which definitely has its supporters. I feel like Act 2 and Act 3 are most people's favorites. But it's different with what's your favorite?
I like the whole thing as a piece. I mean,
all right.
I think though that just feels like such a feat, the idea of seeing, and there's constant movement in that sequence. And so it feels a little bit like watching a magician at work. And also that there's a movie playing in that sequence as well. It's one of these things you find yourself paying attention to. You realize it's synced to the scene. That becomes this whole other kind of excitement about the movie, that you're getting both this technical thrill, this old school technical thrill, and you're watching people moving around and interacting with it. So it feels like it's any number of things that I think I understood why the audience got so excited about it.
Yeah. That was a crazy scene, too, because it goes back to picking these takes and living with one take, and that was a scene that was really hard to decide which take I wanted. The one we did is so much different than all the others, mainly due to Deachin Lackman's performance. Deachin had played almost, I think that was take 17 that we used.
You did 17 takes of
They
that?
weren't all complete takes. There was a few false starts. We probably did 11 complete takes. It's still a lot.
Yes, it is.
Just ask John and all the actors.
And the Steadicam operator.
Oh, God, yeah. Operators. Because especially for that one, they were handing off the camera every 5 minutes or so because there was so much ground to cover. This was like, I don't know, how many, 12 acres or something? And they were going up and down rickety staircases. But Deachin's performance was so different. Like, there's a little more casual banter in all the other takes. That she had a bit of a smile, and her and John's character were kind of giving each other the business back and forth and having a little more fun with it. And then the last take, she just did something totally different, and there was this sadness to the character, which really threw me off. But everyone that I would show the takes to they would have tears in their eyes and just think, oh, you have to use this take. But I guess she kind of took what I always considered to be there, but very kind of buried. The emotions would be buried a lot more, and she kind of brought that to the surface, and it threw me off. But I think it's ultimately made the scene a lot more interesting.
I guess I just found myself too fascinated by the way you use sound in the movie, and that had to be a real bear for you to deal with as well, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially that scene, there's so much going on, and it has to be real. It has to feel like when the camera turns to the right, the sound source goes with it, or when you're going in and out of buildings and there's a boxing match taking place, there's two movies playing on the drive-in, there's music spilling out of people's cars as you travel past the cars. Yeah, it took a lot to build that.
I guess I thought, too, the other sequence, I mean, there's certainly problems in all of them, but going from one bar to another, then being on the street for a while, and what that does to the sound, too, it's interesting because you use sound as a way to convey what's going on as much as you use a visual, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was a way to really ground the movie. It's a kind of weird mix of stylization and naturalism, I think, because obviously I'm creating the soundscape using the movies that I feel, the movies in the background that I feel will set the right tone, or the songs. I'm going to have my characters listening to this song that I feel like expresses the emotions of their character at just this right time. So that's kind of a stylized, very like something I'm doing, but there's also just the naturalism of it has to sound like John Hawkes is really walking from here to here, and the sound, he's getting farther from the speaker.
So let me ask you as a last question, Dennis. When you describe the movie to people, how do you describe it to them?
I mean, I kind of say it's a bit of a modern-day private eye thing, but I'm kind of using the spine of the private eye genre to tell a more personal and character-driven story.
Sounds good to me. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
No, my pleasure. My guest is Dennis Hauck. His film, I'm sitting here holding the soundtrack, which, of course, is on vinyl. The film is Too Late. Our recording engineer here at NPR West is